Tamed, an Arcadia novel. Arcadia, Book 1, by Jackie Ashenden. Narrated by J.T. Lawndale and Mara Vincent.
1. Isabel.
I have to say, Isabel, I'm very disappointed in you.
Caleb's hard, black stare bored steadily into mine.
I expected better.
Caleb Cross, certified asshole, well-known slave driver, CEO of Cross International, a Fortune 500 investment company with offices around the globe, head office currently based in New York. Also, my boss. Also, one of my dad's closest friends. I'd known him all my life, and when Dad had asked him to give me a position interning at Cross International, I'd been thrilled. Cross was a prestige company, and working there was going to give me great experience for when I finally took over as CEO of Fox Tech, my father's company. Also, Caleb was a brilliant businessman, and even though he was reputed to be somewhat of a tyrant as a boss, he paid his staff extremely well, and apparently they all loved him. To say I was pumped to start work there would have been to understate my excitement. Then I actually started work, and it soon became rapidly clear that the rumors of Caleb being a tyrant were absolutely true. He was a tyrant, and the only question that remained was whether he was a prick to all his employees, or whether he was just a prick to me. Now I'd been there a whole month, I decided that he was just a prick to me. He sat behind his desk in the massive corner office that overlooked Manhattan like the Death Star overlooking Alderaan, lounging in his CEO-registered black leather chair as if he was Darth Vader himself. And even though I was starting to resent him with all my being, even now, I had to acknowledge once again my secret shame. He was hot. He was just so hot. 6'5" and built like a Greek god, he wasn't typically handsome. His face was too rough-hewn for that. But he was so charismatic, you literally couldn't take your eyes off him. He had this intense energy, something kinetic that set the air humming whenever he was in a room, that made everyone in it sit up and look around to see what the fuss was about. It was him. He was the fuss. With short black hair, straight black brows, and eyes dark as midnight, the man put Lucifer himself to shame. His features were all hard angles and brutal planes, like someone had taken a chisel to him and hadn't bothered to smooth out the edges. Not that Caleb needed smoothing. He was too much as he was. Anyway, he was gorgeous, and I had a crush on him a mile wide. And needless to say, I was angry about it. After all, he was nearly 20 years older than me, used to look after me when I was a kid, and still saw me that way, if I wasn't much mistaken. And he was also one of Dad's best friends, so completely off limits. I was also angry because he was still gorgeous even when he was being a complete asshole and calling me out for being late. By 2 minutes. I glared at him. "Sorry," I said, not sounding sorry at all. Caleb looked at me with that intense laser focus, as if he wasn't just memorizing my face, but memorizing every cell of my being. It was disconcerting, mainly because I found it such a turn-on. Mentally, I cursed my father for getting me this job, and then I cursed myself for taking it. What the hell had I been thinking? I'd heard the rumors of his dictatorial management style, but I'd assumed that since I was a family friend, I wouldn't have to deal with that bullshit. How wrong I'd been.
I don't know that you are, Caleb said. Because if you were, you'd be on time. The subway... Don't give me excuses.
His voice was deep, almost a subsonic rumble.
If you're late tomorrow, you're out. Understand me?
I could feel my cheeks heating even as I fumed silently, and the blush didn't help my temper. There was no reason for me to feel ashamed, not over 2 minutes, and I hated that I did. I also hated how he made me feel like a naughty child called to the principal's office for punishment. Are you sure you hate that? Don't say you wouldn't love to be turned over his knee. My hands clenched into fists as the thought popped into my head fully formed. Of me, face down and spread over Caleb's powerful thighs, while he... No. Hell no. I was not going into full-on fantasy mode right here in his office, with him staring at me. That was for later, in the privacy of my own bedroom, for God's sake. Anyway, I didn't know why he was being such an asshole. He wasn't normally. The Caleb I'd known growing up had been kind and understanding, always ready to listen and provide support. A man who'd once been like an uncle to me, and who'd used to take my side whenever Dad was being his usual overprotective dad self. Yet as a boss, he was a demanding, driven perfectionist who did not allow any kind of mistakes. Which would have been fine if he'd also been fair, but he wasn't fair. It felt as if he'd singled me out for special attention, and not the good kind. Perhaps it was because he and Dad had given me the job here, and he didn't want to show me special favors. Whatever. It was annoying, and so much for nepotism. It was 2 minutes, Caleb. I tried to keep my voice neutral. Not 2 hours. He merely raised one black brow.
What did I say about excuses?
I clenched my jaw hard against the fuck you that threatened to spring out. Arguing with him was useless. And anyway, I didn't want to argue with him. Not a good look to argue with the boss when he'd only given me this job as a favor to Dad. I'd wondered on and off if he was being an asshole to test me, because I hadn't earned my position here like everyone else. I'd even wondered if he hadn't wanted to give me the job, and was trying to get rid of me, though that was unlikely. He wasn't a man who ever had a problem saying exactly what he thought or doing exactly what he wanted. And if he hadn't wanted me on staff, he'd have simply said no to Dad. No, it was probably a test, in which case there was no way I was going to fail it. I needed this job. It was my chance to prove that while I might speak my mind more than was appropriate, my bullshit tolerance threshold was low, and could be difficult at times. I was trying to be better. Dad had given me a talking to the previous week about how my lack of personal self-control was a concern. He told me he'd gotten me a job with Caleb, and that this was my chance to prove I could be the daughter he wanted to take over Fox Tech. Because if I couldn't, he was going to have to rethink his choice of successor. It was sobering, and it made me feel ashamed of myself.
Fine, I said through gritted teeth. If you don't want this job, Isabel, you only have to say.
Caleb leaned back in his chair, his elbows resting on the arms, his long-fingered hands loosely linked. Today, he was wearing an impeccably tailored suit in dark blue wool and a crisp white shirt. The jacket was slung over the back of the chair, and he had the top couple of buttons of his shirt undone. No tie. His shirt sleeves were rolled up to expose muscular forearms. The lines of one of his intricate black work tattoos licked down the olive skin of his left arm, nearly to the heavy platinum band of his Patek Philippe watch. God, there was something about a big watch on a man's strong wrist. It made my mouth go dry, and unfortunately...